All right, my new poster came. Kind of a little smaller than I thought it'd be. We'll just use the digital one for right now until I can get another. All right. So, Bernard sends Delores on a quest. Maeve begins to question her reality, and Ford shows just how much of a god he is. It's HBO's Westworld, Season 1, Episode 4, Dissonance Theory. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to our review of this week's episode of Westworld. So, there are spoilers ahead, just so you've been warned. Alright, things are ramping up and beginning to ramp up quickly. A lot of movement, a lot of things happening, and a lot of characters starting to move in the same direction. Now let's start things off with Delores and that whole opening sequence. And I think this is really going to start shining a light into some of the bigger questions in the show. I mean, first of all, we have, again, as we've had the past few episodes, we have Bernard's conversation with Delores, trying to answer questions, see extra things into it, insights. Kind of, it seems in some ways that this is Bernard questioning the evolution of Dolores' consciousness. And Delores is starting to ask a lot of big questions. Really throughout this episode, she is really starting to dive into philosophy and almost a second, stepping outside of herself and seeing her own kind of expansion of consciousness. And she had used in that line, it's like a whole bunch of doors had opened up. It's like a big building and all these doors are opening that I never knew were there. Very poetic, very philosophical in her viewpoint. But really, I mean, we get one thing. First of all, we have Bernard introducing her to the concept of the maze. Nothing really more than that outside that it's a game and the goal is to get to the center of it. And if she can get to the center of it, perhaps she can be free, which she would definitely like to do. Very interested in that. And that is really interesting because, of course, it's reflection back to the man in black and his pursuit of the maze itself. So it seems the two of these are starting to be put in the same, headed in the same direction. But one of the main things that brought up to me within this scene is really the question of how are these conversations going? I mean, it was easy to kind of imagine that this is in between the days during the regular repair schedule while she is asleep, that Bernard has brought her down to like the control center and is having this conversation with her. And especially since it always leaves like we need to send you back before you are missed. It seems to imply that she has been physically gone. However, in this, the question is starting to see is where's actually this conversation happening? Is she being downloaded somewhere? Is this happening as kind of a communication in the brain? Is this even Bernard in that sense? Because we have kind of two sides of Bernard that show up. In here, he's very deep, he's very philosophical. But when we next see Bernard and his conversation with Elsie, he's sounding a lot like Ford in the ways of, these seem human, but they are not. You have to keep that separation, that distance. It's very much a different character from the Bernard that we are seeing in those conversations with Delores. Now, this could just be two sides of Bernard. But if these conversations aren't physically happening with Delores, how is that? And is this a form of upload, or is this Arnold? Or some form of Arnold? I mean, we hear a lot more of him in this episode as well. The conversations, Man in Black is saying about, that he had this idea and he had all of these plans, but then he died, but he still has one adventure left. We seem to get that Arnold is behind this whole maze idea, and if that is the case, then what does Bernard know about it? It's just, we're starting to get into a lot of these real deeper questions. And I think K. Richard J., you had brought this up in one of the comments that we had from the last week, which I think really hits on a lot of points, is it's very easy to start to question who is human and who is a host in this. And to me, it's a lot of times it seems like Bernard is sometimes possibly an artificial being. That possibly he is a host, maybe one of Arnold's projects that have been set into the rest. I mean, we're starting to deal with all of these layers because we're dealing with the questions of reality, of what makes us human, And I think it's very easy to, it's very easy to be empathetic with very human lifelike hosts, but since we are diving into a lot of these questions of what is reality, what is consciousness, not only is it something for the hosts to be diving into, but it's something that we can now start to compare with the humans. And I think that confusion, that gray line, is exactly what the show is going for. It's keeping us guessing, but also through that, making us ask deeper questions ourselves. Now, another strange thing about Dolores' journey here is really the questioning of what is real and what isn't, in the sense that when she heads to the Mexican town and has the conversation with Lawrence's daughter there by the fountain and gets that little clue into the maze. I mean, her little statement, I come from the same place that you do. And she's drawing the little maze on the ground, and it's that hint. But when the QA person comes, when the behaviors guy comes to try and round her up, the little girl's not there. The daughter's not there. And I think the same thing could be said with the guns that we saw. In her dreams, she would go and pulled out the gun. And then in last week's episode, she'd opened up the drawer and pulled out the gun, set it down, looked back, and it was gone. There could be a question of how much of this are memories that are bleeding in, but especially with the scene with the little girl and the hint about the maze. Now, she's never done that before, but it's not really physically there. So again, how much of this is imagining, and how much of that is the way that new programming is coming in and uploading into the system? I think it raises a lot of questions in that sense, and I think really cool. Also, I do have to say, just as a quick aside, how much I loved how the behaviors unit comes in to pull off Delores and is in full costume and does it completely in character, insisting that she goes, but of course as soon as the guest comes out, there, everybody's here for the guest, so sure, oh, she's with you, okay, now we have an answer, we can check this off on our sheet back at the control center and clear everything up. But anyway, I love those little moments, but I think these are further questions that are going to go on, because it's not going to be necessarily what is reality for them, but in some ways what is really happening and how much is happening in their heads. Now, Maeve's journey is getting very intense, and really have to feel for this poor android that's going through all these, because all of her memories of all of these experiences, and again, park's been going on for 30 years, guests are coming in and they're causing, mass sexual wakes or mass death wakes or just things are changing and narratives are repeating over and over again. And now that Maeve has this memory, I'm not even going to necessarily say glitch anymore, because there seems to be more of an intentional level on that. I mean, as Elsie and Bernard were talking about down there as they're working on the guy who bashed his head in, these are not just small variations. This is not just a glitch. This is something major that is going on. And for May, it is manifesting in that constant, it's like a deja vu from hell. Constantly seeing these images, and you've got guests. I mean, she saw that one guest in the saloon that was laughing, and that sparked a memory from what I believe to be last time the guest was there. Heck, it might have even been the day before. That she is going through this and having that. I love she's having the conversation with Pennywise right next to her, and then has that big flashback of the murder scene, and then she awakes and she's right back saying the same things. Why, these are their program bits. How many times have they done this over and over again? And we can ask these questions now even more so, because we have that scene where Maeve has been flipping out, finally is checking, looking for bullet holes, and finally draws the image. The technician that she's been seeing goes to hide it and finds multiple drawings that she has done of the same thing. How many times does she keep repeating this and seeing this over and over and over again, is really being that primary motivator. So much so that even at the end, when she has that big scene with Hector, which was beautifully done, and making him dig in and look for that bullet that's in there, and then finds it and pulls it out in her last line, relaying, none of this matters. This, you gotta imagine what sort of physiological shock this has to be, of seeing your whole world now has been a lie, that there is something deeper and bigger, and everything that you think is real isn't. And she, as a character, she's going through all of this. And I just think, it's beautiful done. Tandy Newton is just doing an amazing, amazing bit. And in fact, I'm going to throw this out. She did a great interview on the Frame. It's an NPR radio show. If you guys are at all interested, you can go to npr.org and track it down, The Frame. She did this just earlier this week. Really talking about Westworld, her character, why she has done it, and you can really see why in this episode an actor would want to jump in and just dive into a role as meaty as this, really asking big questions and just amazing performances. She is carrying this out just on a fabulous, fabulous level. And Dr. Ford, oh man, Anthony Hopkins, you are an acting god. Just amazing, amazing sequences. The size and scope of those scenes as Theresa goes to talk to Ford, and you just see the giant machine just tearing up and forming this canyon. And then you get to see all the workers are hosts, and they're still wearing their Western gear. It's like they just got plucked from the middle of their narrative and sent down, which of course is part of the things that the board of directors and everybody is kind of upset with Ford about. Now that sort of makes sense. He is literally taking them and using them. I don't know if slave labor actually works when they're hosts, but you know what I mean. I mean, just using them as labor was immense. But the scene that he had with Theresa there really starts to give that iron. And before we can sort of think him as almost befuddled, wandering the dark corridors of the corporation and tinkering with different hosts. In this element right here, there is a whole different level going on. There is that intensity and that disdain for the money people around. You know, they said we didn't want these people in, but they were necessary. Really not caring about what they want. Really is here simply to demonstrate his godlike abilities in this world. And he really does. I mean, he's able to command the hosts without saying anything. You know, he freezes all of them, again, extra creepy when they do this, in the midst of pouring the wine, and then just sends them off without anything else. And then they head off back into work without any real statement off of him. Really just demonstrating the control and the way that he is placing himself in this world, and especially the way that he had commented back about Arnold, that yes, Arnold died because he went mad, he lost his vision, he got confused. I've always seen things very clearly. That's a psychotic statement right there. I mean, and I only say that because of everything else that is going on. Maybe he's not psychotic, but he's definitely egomaniacal in that sense. And I guess all great people are, they have to believe that they are gods in order to create the things that they do. But Anthony Hopkins really, Ford's just demonstrating this. And I think the best moment was even at the end when that kind of earthquake things happen and you just see the giant machine rising up out of the dirt, just chewing everything up, looking like it's heading right for where they're eating, because of course he is not sentimental at all. Just really is a fantastic demonstration of his character and why we should be a little wary of whatever narrative that he is setting up. And a lot more of the Man in Black in this episode too, and there are actually some great moments. I think Ed Harris has some of the wonderful little moments peppered throughout this. One, the way that he interacts with the rest of the host. I mean, really showing that this is a guy who has been there, done that, has been, again, coming to the park for 30 years, done almost all the adventures, not all of them, because he did mention that he'd never bothered with Hector's little adventure right there, and he was kind of enjoying that conversation. But the way that he talks with the hosts is kind of like implying and not totally straight out saying that everything is fake for them, and the way that he is seeing it. Again, he's not necessarily really spoiling anything directly, but just using the side comments and little suggestions and such, proving how much more that he knows than everybody else. I think it works for this type of character that he is playing, which we do at least get a little hint about it in charge of a foundation that saves people's lives. You don't really know much more than that, but certainly he's not really caring as he shuts those guys down pretty much immediately. Yes, I will kill you if you ask any more questions. I'm on vacation. Anyway, just All of these were just wonderful little moments, the way that he's conversing with both the hosts and the rest of the guests around him. Also, classic bit, the exploding cigar. That was hilarious. That was a beautiful work on an old trope. It was just wonderfully done. And I love those little switch. Again, other little things that constantly go on. The references back to the control room, how he goes and lights the match and we're immediately in the control room. Hey, we've got a request for 2 small explosions. Okay, we'll let those go off. And so I guess that allows the cigars to explode. Hilarious. And they do the same thing later on when Hector's invading taking over the town, just as he and Maeve are having that really deep conversation. That the control room decides, all right, well, we'll send in the cavalry now, jam up those guests' gun, because we had 2 guests inside of Hector's gang. And then we'll send them off to jail for the night. Go on. Anyway, I love these quick little insights into what's happening into the control room. It's a little comic glimpse behind the scenes. Though I have to say, my favorite part in the whole episode with him was Lawrence's execution. Just completely repeating the scene when he was being hung and they put the blindfold on and then it's just gunshots and he pulls it down and everyone is dead and the man in black is standing right in front of him. And they do the exact same thing with this. I thought was hilarious and beautiful. And I love Lawrence's just view of, what the hell? I mean, it's got to be a little shocking for him. I mean, he's just a host, but still, again, you got to feel for everyone here. Now, like I had said, everyone seems to be heading towards a lot of the same goals. We've got the man in black that's heading to the maze. Now Delores is heading the same way. And the clue that the man in black is given connects in with Wyatt, who is part of the new narrative that Ford is putting together that we were hearing the background story of given to Teddy last week, which is how Teddy ends up meeting up here. So this seems, now again, the question that I'm starting to raise up with here is, how is this being woven into the narrative inside of Man in Black's own mission? Even within the maze now, is now we have somebody that seems to be part of a new narrative being inserted into an old problem. So I'm curious how much of Ford knows about the quest for the maze and how much he doesn't. So I think that's going to wrap us up for this week. A lot of big questions being posed out, a lot of convergences of characters, and I think we might even see Maeve heading out further into the park with her question of Hector about the shades that were sent from hell to oversee our world, aka technicians. Are these Westworld technicians? Are these Arnold's technicians? What is going on there? I'm not sure. I mean, they're putting a lot of mystery around Arnold's death, and I'm really wondering, A, if he is dead. I mean, it's been like 30 years. You think somebody would have run into him. Or B, if some of the humans are actually hosts, like Bernard or whatever, that might be fulfilling some of his directives. A lot of bigger questions that are coming on. And then, of course, what is the narrative that Ford is formulating? It is not reflective, he's not sentimental, it is not something from the past, it seems to be something entirely new. So I think that's going to change the stakes greatly when we find out what that is. All right, so that's it. Did you enjoy all this? Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button right over here. You can come back every week. The Walking Dead just started up this week. Massively intense. If you're a Walking Dead fan, hopefully you are probably recovering from seeing that. If you are not, this is definitely a time to jump in. But I will warn you, this opening episode is physically and emotionally a gut punch. So that's something right there. We're also doing, of course, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Tuesdays nights. Reviews come out on Wednesdays. You can check that out. Thoughts, ideas, what are you thinking? Any more thoughts? Who do you think is a host? Who do you think is still human? What is going on behind everything, and why is everyone heading out to Wyatt? What are your thoughts? Throw those down in the comments section below. We can talk before next week's episode. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Darren Jakes. Other than that, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm D, and I am out of here. I'll see you guys next week. Take it easy. Bye-bye.